We begin this evening with breaking news as a court ruling has forced the Pentagon today to release around 200 photos documenting torture and abuse at the hands of U.S. officials. RT correspondent Alexey Yaroshevsky has been following the story for us and is here now for the latest. Alexey, I shudder to even think about the answer to this question, but what do we see in these photos?
Compared to what may be in those photos which have not yet been released by the Pentagon, and we're talking about 1,800 photos that the American Civil Liberties Union claim that the Pentagon is still withholding, those are lighter injury images that the ACLU are saying. So we can see on those pictures a lot of bruises, reddened marks, and bandaged body parts as well. None of these pictures actually show the face of a detainee in full. In some pictures we can see coins and rulers used to mark the size of an injury, but mostly those are bruises and different marks. None of them actually give us any idea as to what kind of injuries those were, why they were made, and where the detainees were held exactly. So there's a lot of vague stuff about those pictures, but it's worth mentioning that it's something of a long-going struggle, and this is not a big surprise that those pictures have been released, because I remember reporting on this last November when Ash Carter, the Defense Secretary, said that those pictures will be released at some point later. So now this came into fruition. Obviously, we have those pictures now, and they have been handed to the ACLU, published already by The Guardian and many other outlets, and we can see what's in them.
Yeah, right. When you think of photos of abuse, you almost expect to see something like Abu Ghraib, and these seem to be very toned down in comparison. But as you mentioned, there are more photos the ACLU is pushing to have released. How did we get to this point where the Pentagon was forced to release these 200 or so? Well,
it's been relentless public pressure, particularly from the ACLU. In fact, the litigation has been going on for a decade, since 2005. We remember this whole outcry about the allegations of torture inside Abu Ghraib and potentially even Guantanamo. This, when it came into effect in 2005, the first major breakthrough that ACLU has got was 2014, when a district judge in New York said that those images need to be released. And we famously remember in 2009, President Obama actually changed his stance on those pictures, said that they may not be made public because that would jeopardize the soldiers' positions and probably create a more anti-American sentiment across the world. So now Ash Carter said in November last year that those pictures need to be released. He basically reversed decisions made by his two predecessors, and those pictures have been made public. But funnily enough, ACLU, as I've mentioned, they say that 1,800 pictures are being withheld by the Pentagon, and that's where they say far graver abuses are being displayed. For instance, they cite a case when an Iraqi man was shot dead with his hands up by U.S. military in Iraq, and things like that. So though this content and those pictures still withheld by the Pentagon is something that ACLU says needs to be released as soon as possible. They even cite the case of Eric Garner, as we remember, the man who was killed by NYPD, that if things like that become public, it provides change, and this is something that ACLU have been pushing for in terms of the U.S. military and the allegations of torture, especially in the Bush era.
It's interesting that we're also talking this on the day when WikiLeaks is all over the news as well. I guess the theme here today is freedom of information, and thank you so much for looking at those pictures for us and letting us know what's going on. That was RT correspondent Alexey Yaroshevsky.